Hold on, let me see if I still got it.
Summer, everything's better in the summer. The good old happy summertime.
To begin, I'm a female, and this started when I was 14. I'm now 21. I had just transferred to a new high school in the middle of the school year as a freshman with my twin sister. I was enrolled in a Spanish 2 class where I met Tony, and that is where the obsession began. When I started my class and met Tony, I instantly thought he was attractive. He was tall, had brown hair and beautiful eyes for a guy, and was also a year my senior. But I did notice he was extremely shy and kind of awkward. But I made up excuses to talk to him, asking him about homework and other meaningless small talk. He took to me and asked if I wanted to walk around during lunch and talk, and I happily agreed. He was obviously not very confident and didn't know how to initiate a conversation, so I did most of the talking. I even went as far as asking for his phone number. After a few days of texting and talking, I can tell he doesn't have any friends, and he's kind of negative, and has a pessimistic view toward life. It was actually rather draining and disappointing. The things he would say were kind of unsettling, or I guess just unusual for me. He would text me fantasizing about being a superhero, kind of like roleplay, in which I was the damsel in distress, and he was my savior. And text me somewhat similar to those choose-your-own-adventure stories, always ending in the damsel and the hero kissing or being together. He had an obsession with slasher from the Scream movies. Overall, he was a nice guy, but different from what I was expecting, and different than what I was attracted to. So, time passes. Valentine's Day is coming up. We're talking practically every day, so he asked me to be his Valentine. I agree, somewhat reluctantly. So, it's Valentine's Day. He walks up to me and gives me a pack of Hershey's Kisses and some Twizzlers. I don't even like Twizzlers. So, I handed them back to him, gave him a kiss on the cheek, and went to my class. Yes, I know that was kind of a bitch move, but I was honestly losing interest in him at this point, and told him before that I didn't like red vines or any candy like that. Throughout the day, I received more gifts, flowers and candy from others, friends, and then I see Tony, and I can tell he's extremely upset by this, but doesn't say anything. He texts me later in the day saying how stupid he felt and how he was outdone by everybody else. I didn't respond. Over the next few weeks, I gradually talked to him less and less. Class is awkward, and I can tell he wants to say something to me, but never does. I later learned from my twin sister that he asks her every single day about me, if I'm talking to someone else, if I like him, how to win me over, confiding in her that he has never even talked to a girl before. And at first, I think it's sweet, but I still no longer had any romantic interest in him. We would talk at school sometimes. He would bring me homemade cookies, walk me to the train station, still text and try to call me in the evenings after school. But I was talking to someone new, who eventually became my boyfriend for the rest of high school, Brandon. When I started dating Brandon, I knew that Tony was absolutely devastated. He then started telling people around school that I was his first kiss. I was confused because I didn't know a kiss on the cheek counted as a first kiss, but to each their own. It was somewhat upsetting because people were getting the impression that we dated, or that I played him, which was not the case at all. I would still talk to Tony as a friend. He was in the same grade and classes as my new boyfriend, and he would always tell me how he thought Brandon didn't like him, and that he felt like Brandon knew about us. I told Tony that there was nothing to know about us because we weren't anything but friends, and Brandon was totally chill, non-confrontational stoner type, not in his nature to stir up drama over nothing, and he definitely wasn't the jealous type. The school year was coming to an end, and Tony comes running up to me after the last day of school and hands me this, I shit you not, 60 or 70 page notebook, wide ruled if it makes a difference, explaining all the ways that he's in love with me, and how everybody at the school thinks poorly of me, how he can treat me better, blah blah blah. I read it once, show my twin, and she tells me how weird and uncomfortable it makes her, and we both agree. I stash it away and don't speak of it to anybody. I act like nothing happened, and I still talk to him as a friend occasionally. I worked a lot in high school in my free time, and I spent a lot of time with my boyfriend and friends, and didn't think much about Tony. Time goes on. We eventually stop talking. I see him around school, and he's never really with anybody else. He's usually always alone, which I don't find strange anymore, considering how awkward and quiet he can be. Fast forward another year. I'm a junior. Tony and Brandon are both seniors, getting ready to graduate. Tony texts me out of the blue one day and tells me he's written a book, and it would mean the world to him if I could be the first to read it and give him my feedback. And being the person I am, I agree. So, he comes up to me at school the next day and hands me this fat notebook and tells me to take my time reading it and to give him honest feedback when I was finished. I read this story in 4 class periods. It was around 300 pages long. This story takes place in a Game of Thrones type setting. The 3 main characters are Eric, who is Tony, Alva, who is me, and Isaac, who is Brandon. For the sake of confusion, I'll be referring to the characters by our names. The only reason I know the characters were us and not fictional was simply by the way he described them, literally identical to our physical appearances. To continue, Tony was the son of the king or whatever. The rest of us were mere peasants. But Tony was always in love with me, but I was with Brandon. It was this annual time period where our kingdom would go to battle with another for honor and glory, gladiator style. Tony thought it would be a wonderful time to prove himself, and volunteered. The night before our kingdom traveled to where the battle would take place, my character went to Tony in the middle of the night to express her love and fear, and they ended up having very graphic sex. It was truly disturbing. The next day, after they had arrived at the place of battle, my character went to his room again, where again, the same graphic encounter occurred, and Brandon came looking for my character, and we were caught. My character told Tony that I don't really love him, and ran after Brandon to apologize for being a harlot. Tony was devastated, and ultimately let his opponent kill him in battle, because he couldn't handle the loss of the love of his life. Our kingdom goes back home, and in the middle of the night, Brandon sneaks through the window and murders me. He slit my throat. The end. As you can imagine, I was absolutely horrified and creeped out. I threw the book away and never told Tony what I thought about it. He must have known because he never asked for it back. Tony and Brandon both graduate, and life goes on. Tony didn't try to reach out to me for a few years, until I was around 20. He randomly messaged me on Instagram in the middle of the night.
Show me your feet. Submit to daddy. I always looked at your feet at school, and would fantasize about them,
along with links to a few foot fetish websites. I promptly blocked him. The next day, he messaged me on another account, a foot fetish and bondage account that he ran. He asked me why I blocked him, and I blocked him again. And then, earlier last year on my new account, he messaged me, basically calling me a whore, and how he wishes I would die, and how he hated everyone we went to school with, and how he hoped we all would die. How he fantasized on how he would kill me for all the pain that I caused him. I was genuinely afraid, but I didn't know how to handle the situation. Was it really a death threat? I don't know. I later learned that he worked at a diner down the street from my apartment. I avoided it at all costs. I've since moved, and I haven't heard from Tony since. But multiple girls I went to high school with told me he was obsessed with me and would constantly talk about me to them, and how he would message them the same disgusting things while he was on a drunken stupor. Anyway, Tony, let's never meet again. When I was 17, my bedroom had a window looking out at the backyard. The backyard was fenced in, but on the other side of the fence there were some woods and a retention pond. I had never been scared of this, and I kept the blinds open so that when the sun rose in the morning, the natural light would help wake me up. One night, I was up late on my phone with my dog laying in the bed next to me. At around 2 a.m., my dog jumped up and started barking at the window. At first, I thought he was just barking at his reflection, and I told him to stop. But then I realized he was looking out the left side of the window, and his reflection was on the right. I couldn't see outside the window because I had left the lamp on my nightstand on. All I could see in the window was the reflection of my bedroom. Not wanting to alert whatever might be out there that I was scared, I faked a yawn, set my phone aside, and turned off the lamp. I then laid down facing the window, and I swear, I saw a set of human eyes looking back at me from the left side of the window. I drink a lot of water at night, so I had an empty bottle on my nightstand. I grabbed it and pretended to just realize that it was empty. I turned the lamp back on and acted like I was going to get water. I went to my parents' room, and I told my dad, who told me not to worry. We had these motion-activated floodlights, and they hadn't turned on, so he said there was no way that anything was out there. I just went back to my room and told myself I was seeing things. I closed the blinds and turned on the lamp and got some sleep. When I woke up in the morning, I went to take my dog out and decided to check out the pine straw bedding underneath my window. It was visibly disturbed. I did my best to ignore that and remember what my dad had said about the floodlights. That worked pretty well, until my dad tested the floodlights later that day and found that the bulbs had burnt out. To this day, I keep my blinds closed and my lamp off when I sleep. I don't want to risk anything being able to see me, and if anything is somehow peeking through my window, I want to know it's there. So, if there was someone at my window that night, let's not meet. I discovered this sub while with my friend Julia, who's with me as I'm typing this out because we just got back from a camping trip where we experienced the scariest thing either of us have ever experienced. So, Julia and I are both women in our early 20s, and we were out camping in a remote area of Montana that isn't super popular, but it's still fairly popular amongst locals who camp a lot like we do, which meant it wasn't super unusual when we saw a group of 3 guys who looked to be a little older than us drive past our camp about an hour after we set up our chairs and table. We just assumed that they were searching for a good spot to camp But then, when the car was still in our sight through the trees, we saw it turn around, and as it was driving back, we noticed one of the guys sticking his phone out the window, seemingly recording us. Both of us thought it was really weird, and I walked a bit closer to take a picture of their license plate as a safety measure. But when I got closer, I saw that the back plate had all the numbers covered with black paint. Julie and I both got bad vibes from this, but both of us are aware that men are creeps towards women all the time, and both of us are prepared with bear spray because Montana is grizzly bear country, and we decided it wasn't a weird enough interaction to pack our stuff and find a different spot. So we just decided to put up an empty tent outside and sleep in my car instead, to trick people into thinking we were sleeping in the tent, just in case they tried to come back. Later that night, when we were both asleep in my car, I heard branches rustling and snapping outside by the empty tent, despite the fact that it wasn't windy. Originally, we assumed it was a bear trying to climb up to the bear hang with our food and scented hygiene products. Then, we heard male voices outside. I lifted my head up to the window and saw the same car that passed us earlier. I got off the air mattress on top of the back row of seats that we put down to make an area for us to sleep and locked the doors individually so my car wouldn't make the beeping noise it makes when I lock the doors with the fob. Julie and I stayed still and hoped that the men would leave. For a while, we heard them talking, but we couldn't make out what they were saying from inside my car. We heard more rustling and branches snapping, which made us think they were trying to steal something from the bear hang, which was weird, but neither of us wanted to actually look out of the window in case one of them spotted us. Eventually, we hear the car leave, which was a huge relief, but we were too freaked out to actually leave the car until it was light outside and campers nearby would be waking up. When I got out, nothing could have prepared me for what I saw. Above our tent, the men had hung a dead deer that was obviously killed recently because it was leaking blood all over the top of our tent. The internal organs were ripped out and its limbs were cut off and laid out in a circle around the tent. And this is messed up on its own, but hunting permits aren't even sold right now, which means that the deer was killed illegally to do whatever it was that those guys did. As soon as we processed what we were looking at, Julia and I freaked out and drove away without even taking down camp. Once we were in service, Julia called the police and Forest Service to report what happened while I drove home. Forest Service was nice enough to get our stuff for us, but I didn't even want mine back in case there was some weird curse on it or something. The police are looking into it to charge a fine for killing wild game during the off-season, but as far as I know, what they did to us technically isn't illegal. It's just really fucking creepy. I haven't heard of anything like this before, but if you have, let me know. I'm very curious and very creeped out. I love camping so much, but after this, I don't know if I can camp for a long time.